Oh, goodness, beloveds. I am just so excited to be in conversation. Today, we are joined, and I invite them onto our screen by pastor, writer, theologian. I'm going to be a super groupie of the Reverend Daniel Cooperrider. It's just a wonderful opportunity as we come up into our April season where we tend to think of Earth Day and it's springtime. What is it? April showers bring May flowers. And so it is a perfect time for us to be in conversation. So welcome to the screen, Reverend Daniel, and thank you for joining us today. What a gift to be here with you. Oh, look at all the people where look, we are representing across the country. We have Virginia, we have Illinois, we have Pennsylvania, we have Iowa, Florida, New Hampshire, and then we have different denominations, Massachusetts. We're not all UCC, so people are really, really excited to be here with us today. And so, Daniel, how is it with your soul and your body today? I'm trying to introduce our Nurture the Soul community. Some of us may already know, but how it is that our body, our full selves are living in our experience today. So, how is it with your
Mhm.
soul and body?
Well, thank you, Ellie. It's such a joy to be with you and have this chance to be in conversation. And greetings and gratitude to each of you for your presence here for this time of reflection. And yeah, what a great question. It lands differently than, like how are you, which given the state of the world and how we're all feeling, it can make us cringe when we have to answer it again a little bit inside. And so I just love it. It's an elevating question that gets us going, gets us thinking kind of theologically and spiritually. And for me, it just I hear in that the question to myself, what do I mean today by soul? Soul is one of these elusive beautiful religious concepts that for me is emergent, and I'm on a constant journey of evolution with my understanding of. So, three words for me today about soul are windswept,
Ooh,
capacious,
ooh,
and convivial.
ooh,
So
ooh,
windswept, and
I
this
love
one
it.
this one brings the body into it, or like collapses maybe false separation between soul and body, or spirit and matter, which is I'm here in Madison, Wisconsin, and it's been a very typical March day, kind of moody and mercurial, all sorts of different weather, sunshine, clouds, rain right now, starting to fall. But the decisive kind of feel of today for me is wind, and I'm just
Mm,
getting back from just a normal neighborhood walk and quite a robust south wind, and so I'm feeling windswept. I feel like it. I feel it in my hair, like wind knots starting to form, and feel it on my skin, and it just got me reflecting a bit on, yeah, kind of the basics of this word soul. You might well know it's connected to some ancient concepts like nephesh in Hebrew is the word, and that literally points us to the throat, and that's like this organ that brings the air in and breathes and speaks. And then it's connected with ancient Greek psyche or psyche, and Latin words like spirit and spiritus, the Greek word anima too, from animal. All these words actually, they all point to air, wind,
mm,
breath, life force. And so there is this sort of ancient and I think modern sense that like this collapsing of spirit and matter, them all being part of the same thing. And so, yeah, just taking time to feel the wind and appreciate it and feeling myself as an instance of earth aliveness that is inspirited by the breath of life and that the wind of life continues to inspirit.
mm,
And that's something that I share with, the trees in a very material back and forth way, and the birds and you all. And uh, so it gets us thinking about soul not just as an individual thing, but as this interconnectivity. Um, and so I think about windswept, I think about capacious, which in some sense I mean by that it's the capacity to like hold a lot, like spaciousness. And my senses were all kind of feeling that in some ways, like holding a lot.
mm,
And I think think about soul as that kind of capacity or gift that kind of helps us in that holding. of the muchness of being alive. But then also I came across a quote from Teresa of Avila, 16th century Spanish nun mystic, who talked about the soul as a house within which God dwells. And I looked more into that. And this is her famous concept of the soul as the interior castle, more than just a little house. She pictured the soul as a huge castle, like containing houses within houses, households within households. And God was at the very center of that,
Yeah.
which is such a radical thing for me to ponder because if God, who I take to be everything and life itself, everything that was and is and will be, if all of that is within the house or castle of the soul, then the soul must be quite a large, expansive thing.
Yes.
And so um, capacious. And then convivial is the final word coming to me today, and tomorrow the words could be different, and
Yeah.
this afternoon they might well be different. But convivial means with life, convivere. Um, And in the ancient world, it was another word that meant just feast or party, like a get together of life with life. And for me, the kind of moments that feel like soul moments these days are those moments of, I describe it as, yeah, the flickering encounters of life with life. And that, could well be other people and or other presences on the landscape, the more than human world. So just today, for example, I heard a red-tailed hawk pierce the sky. And that piercing of the sky sound, felt like it pierced through me and sort of became part of me for a moment and kind of rearranged how I was experiencing the world and feeling about the world. And I'm not sure the hawk noticed me, but this morning I filled up our bird feeder, which might feed a little bird, and that hawk might catch that little bird and become connected in some sense. So soul as like this moment of life encountering other life in that convivial sense,
Yeah.
and not in the sense of like we're two closed bubbles that just bump up to each other for a second, but like there's like a porousness to it, like an intermingling, a commingling, where kind of we share in that capacious soul for a tiny bit, if that makes sense.
Oh my gosh, it totally makes sense. And you just reminded me of like, I could probably spend an entire series on the words that we use to describe how it is that we are in the world. And each of those words are fantastic. I use convivial a lot in my own world, especially when I get to work alongside marginalized communities. If we're doing work together, we use that convivial approach for sure. And so your language is just one of the many things that I really, really enjoyed about your book. The words that you chose today, the words that you've written two, and I got through one and a half. I really tried to get it. The other one came out, was a new release, and we'll get to that book a little bit later. But I love the language, and I love the way that you organized and structured your book. So anybody, the first book is Speak with the Earth and It Will Teach You, a field guide to the Bible. I love the way that you broke down the sections to cover all of the natural elements. I was just this past Monday evening, I got to experience a ceremony and a feast of a pagan religion and how they honored the four directions. They honored the many elements and calling forth to their gods and goddesses for protection. Also had a red tail hawk make itself present during that ceremony, which was, we're in a prison yard out in the middle of nowhere. There was a red-tailed hawk and a raven that came in, and one of the guys in the prison fell down and wept. He was like, the raven and the hawk mean something in our religious tradition, and for them to we haven't seen a hawk all season. So for them to come and be present and literally, and then there was a mourning dove all sitting on top of the barbed wired fence of the prison fence, and sitting there, and there was a mourning dove and that red-tailed hawk sitting right next to each other, just observing. And then along came the raven, and then that dove got the heck out of town. But it was just this beautiful moment. And so that was when I had an opportunity to speak to the men there, and then some of the women about your book, and they're really excited to read it inside the prison. But it reminded me, like, you broke your first book down into those four areas covering the natural elements, and in particular, on page 41, under the section on apocalyptic hope, you talk about noticing the different types of water that exist. And so I'm curious, when we think about the way you broke down the book, in particular that around that apocalyptic hope and how you use water, can you, based on your experiences, like how do you invite us to notice the things that you noticed in your introduction of where you felt windblown today, to where I had an opportunity to notice things inside the prison? How do you invite us to notice stuff when it's so freaking chaotic all the time?
Um, wow. First, I just love that image of those different bird presences sharing in their own, ceremony as and
Mhm.
ritual as you all were sharing in it as well. So fascinating to me how you make this connection between paying attention and sort of the feeling of the the chaoticness of our times. Because when I think about that latter point, I'm starting to think that, the chaos that we feel, it it's sort of fed by and is the result of kind of the opposite of attention. It may be fed by and is the result of forces of distraction and um, like not actually noticing the life that's in front of us and what's happening to us when we behave towards it in certain ways. And it sort of some of the injustices that we are in resistance to, uh, the more we can sustain attention is the more we can deepen into the type of resistance that we feel called to, and the more distraction gets a hold of us, the less capable we are of meeting the moment. So that's attention and distraction on like a big geopolitical scale, but
Yeah.
I do think there's such a spiritual invitation to just this daily daily practice of noticing and paying attention. And so many wise folks have articulated this so well. Simone Weil talks beautifully about attention taken to its highest form, she writes, is the same thing as prayer. So attention as prayer. And then, beloved poet Mary Oliver is very much in this tradition too. I like how she points out that attention itself is not like the end goal. She says attention without feeling, without empathy, without being moved by what one is paying attention to is only a report. And like you could have a camera sitting there without a person recording something, and that's a type of attention, but without feeling, without entering into uh, felt relationship with. So, but then attention with feeling, she describes as the beginning of devotion. And
Mm.
so I do think of it as attention as sort of like helping train our attentions and attention capacities is one of the real gifts and the good work in the world that's religious communities can be involved in. And
Mm.
however our worship looks on Sunday or any day, worship itself, ritual itself, is a way of focusing attention and inviting people to be focused to the point where they can have an encounter with and an experience of the grace, the wonder, the beauty, the grief that is right in front of that is life itself. So I do, just as like a wellness thing, I guess, like attention can help get us unstuck from those times when we feel that the world is too much with us. Poet Wallace Stevens has a nice little line. He just says, "In my room, the world is beyond my understanding, but I go outside and I see that it consists of three or four hills and a cloud." Um, so the more than human world itself kind of reminds us like of what life is and who we are as living participants with the animate whole. So it's a spiritual practice and it's can help us stay buoyant in troubling times.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. Thank you. And the idea for that question for me really came about when just like reading, this first portion of water and really, being in Arizona, being from Arizona and knowing that the Grand Canyon was once a part of the bottom of the ocean. And it's evident by some of the fossils and some of the things that you can see there. I've wondered always, and I remember being a kid and always going to the rivers looking for gold, because that's what we did when we were kids, but really trying to find a rock where it was where you could tell that it was in harmony, if you will, with the water and wondering what stories it traveled with, as it may have started out like towards the end of your one of your chapters on water is about like the river. It all started with a river and it'll all end with a river. And just so what are the stories that the rocks and the sediment have along that? And I love that you talk about in one of these chapters here on living waters, you say the way the living waters of a river flow down teaches us something. And I think somebody just said something like this into chat. It expresses something, it preaches something about how God's energy, God's love, God's mercy flows down and floods every tiny little crack and corner of creation. The supreme good, according to I'm going to let you say it, Tao Te Ching. Is that how you pronounce it? Tao Te Ching is like water, which nourishes all things without making any effort. Water is constant with the low places that the people disdain, and thus it is like the way or the truth. And so I think so much about not only does the story tell the water, but so do the rocks. And we know, right, in so many of our different varied faith expressions, water as ritual serves really, oh, Tao is pronounced like Tao with a D sound. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. See, I told you we crowdsource in this. I love it. Thank you. Thinking about like our religious practices and our rituals and stuff that we use around water. I'm curious about what is a water ritual that you perhaps use, whether it be in your faith community, with your family, with yourself, and tell us a little bit about why.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you mentioned in that first book, the whole section was on rivers of the Bible and sort of cultivating ways of being with river have long been important to me personally. And
Mhm.
now practices like canoeing and camping near rivers or uh, fishing in rivers or looking for crayfish and mussels and clams in rivers and just kind of visiting rivers as like a place that can be, yeah, refreshing, renewing, have those powers and presence to it. I suppose most recently, I'm my spouse and I are actually quite thinking about water spirituality and water rituals. Uh, Reverend Dr. Julia Berkey, senior pastor, Orchard Ridge UCC in Madison, Wisconsin. She's taking the lead with this project a bit with a sabbatical coming up, but we are presently seeking to deepen in water practices and water ritual. Um, and one of them that we've had most recent experience with is actually trying to engage sauna as a way of gathering spiritual community and engaging with water and with the local watershed. And we did this with our outdoor wild church community that we can talk about maybe a bit later. But earlier this winter, when in Wisconsin we were in a deep freeze, um, we gathered at a nearby sauna that had just been built on a river. And we had a group of like 25 or 30 of us come through the sauna for the course of the afternoon. And um, we cut a hole in the ice. The river was frozen. And so many, many brave folks went from the sauna to the river and back to the sauna and to the river. And I I was sort of, I had ice spikes on my boots and I was sort of accompanying people out to the hole in the ice and then just being present there for that moment of descent, as you say. Um, I think about, yeah, the moment of Jesus's baptism, those downward flowing waters of the Jordan River getting dunked under the river itself, the dove descending. It's this kind of theology of descent, God's grace pouring down into every crack and crevice of creation. Anyways, and then folks would come up out of those frozen waters with like the steam pouring off of them, like a cloud coming up out of the water, and like the type of like sense of aliveness was so palpable, and like it felt baptismal, uh, and water was engaged in some other ways, like the water you bring in the traditional Finnish sauna, you bring a bucket of water into the sauna with you. And we brought the fresh water from the river right next to us and kind of invited people to greet the water and to engage with it playfully with their hands and sort of ritual washing inside the sauna. And then invited each person to take a chance with the ladle and pour a ladle of the river water onto the hot sauna rocks. And in the Finnish style, that's like the supreme spiritual moment of sauna. They call it lulu. And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's like the spirit of the sauna, the life force. And you just have this moment when you're engaging with the water and putting it on the rocks, and you hear the hiss, and it turns to steam, and you feel that wave of steam. And it's like the transformation of elements happening right there. And you're kind of a part of this ritual. Anyway, it was the first time we'd ever done that, but we're gonna experiment with some more opportunities like that. And I just love like I think it's so exciting to try to articulate some of these things that might not traditionally be seen as spiritual community and spiritual practice as such. And so the water ritual for me right now that I'm excited about is sauna combined with plunging or engaging with a local water lake
Yeah.
or river or what have you.
Yeah. Okay, so in the world of non-spiritual practices, there's a whole organization out here where I'm at that has their name and then cold plunge, right? And you have all of these wonderful young um uh athletic folks that are experts in this ritual that they use for the healing of their body. Many of them are college athletes, and so use it as a way to reset their nervous system and to work in so many of the other health aspects. And I did not find the same relief. I was not able to let myself go. And I have thought about, like what that might mean in a broader spectrum. So as you described, being able to be witness to seeing people, bring in elements of what they were going to be going into the sauna, watching the transformation of that icy cold water over those hot rocks, and then giving in and saying, "Yeah, we're ready to jump into frozen lake." No, I bet I would learn so much, and I feel so much guilt and disappointment in myself that I wasn't able to let myself go. And so it is something that I think about. Okay, is that cold plunge moment whenever there's something coming up in my own ministry that I'm recognizing that is blocking it, and then what are the things that I need to do to just to give in and give up and to know that it'll be okay no matter how cold you are. But speaking of kind of plunging in, we're going to continue on with your book, and thank you for sharing that water ritual. I'll be excited to continue to have that conversation with you to see how it goes with your community. Um, One of the things that I notice here in Arizona is we have these, we're part of a larger mountain range. We have the Sky Islands here, which is for anybody that's curious, just go type in Sky Islands, Arizona, Mexico to see the gift that the Sky Islands give to our ecology here in the United States. And water will almost always come down from the mountain, right? Our streams and everything is filled by whatever water and snow that accumulates on top of that mountain. And when you look at our mountains out here in Arizona, you're like, yeah, I can do that. And then like 3 miles in, you're like, actually, maybe I can't quite hike up there in as much time as I thought it was. And so our mountains not only are that physical invitation to engage with Mother Nature and the spiritual thing, but it is also a way to help us change our perspective, right? And you actually get a chance to speak about the perspective of mountains, at least how we read it from a theological or from biblical times. You say that mountains are often celebrated as that beautiful dwelling place of the divine and as awesome marvels of creation. And yet, so many of us that live in this world, we know, this is me saying this, that you say we also find moments when the difficulty and challenge of mountains reveals them as sites of physical and spiritual testing, temptation, and confrontation. Mountains in the Bible can be both occasions for this innate way in which we can know God. And so I hear you saying, thinking about mountains in this way mean that we can actually experience love and joy and death and grief all at the same time. And to think a little bit about what you say when we've talked in the past, you've talked about this climate grief and environmental anxiety are actually invitations for us to live with radical earth empathy. And so I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about how mountains reveal the complexity of what it is that we're called to feel and be in the world.
Mm, mm. Well, I'll begin thinking alongside of that with mountains, but it's really any landscape feature
Sure.
can meet that moment too, which is um, with the quote you read from my book. I think I was trying to um, just point out how I think sometimes when we use images from the natural world in our spiritual thinking, we can sometimes find ourselves kind of reducing them to kind of cliches. So like mountaintop can mean like a mountaintop means amazingness. Valley means, not a time of sorrow. And of course, on the land itself, mountain doesn't just mean one thing. It has capacity to evoke all sorts of different reactions and wonders and valley too. There's nothing inherently dualistic about these things. There's nothing good or bad about them in and of themselves. And so partly that's just a reminder to us to like let the
Yeah.
land exist in its fullness when we use these terms in our thinking. And I'm sure you in the desert landscape experience that desert can be so quickly reduced to, a metaphor for like
Mhm.
the parched experience of life,
Mhm.
whereas the desert itself is in its own way teeming with
Yeah.
abundance and beauty and life and death and all the aspects. So it's in some sense just a reminder to uh, give the natural world the fullness of its presence. Um, and I have been pondering this phrase, yeah, radical earth empathy, which to me feels like such an invitation of our time, which is yes, of course we have to hold the grief and the gratitude at the same time. It's not as if, oh, this month I'm going to be on the mountaintop and then next month I'm going to be down in the valley, quote unquote, to use those terms in that sense. But the invitation is again to try more and more towards that capaciousness of emotional like widening our ability to hold multiple things at once and increasing our emotional repertoire. So Radical earth empathy. I mean, radical in that literal sense of getting to the root of things, um, down to the like mycelial roots that like are below ground, connecting everything. But I also mean it, I guess, transcendently, like remembering our connection to the rest of the cosmos.
Yeah.
Um, and that's I'm finding myself wanting and striving to more and more feel myself as the earth feeling itself during these times, which is that feeling. Emotion is not something that exists only like within the individual, um, within this one body making its journey, but like emotion, maybe there are aspects to it that are atmospheric, that are ecological, that are planetary, and that the earth is like actually inviting us into these feeling to feel alongside the earth as earth. And so that might mean starting to think of it as the climate fear we feel maybe is um, aligned with and similar to the climate fear the trees feel as like a wildfire approaches, or the sense of climate foreboding we might feel is maybe the foreboding that a group of manatees in Florida feel as another supercharged hurricane approaches, or like species loneliness. There's a lot of reflections on loneliness right now, and there's a whole ecological aspect called species loneliness. Maybe that is just feeling into this moment in which this sixth mass extinction, species are disappearing from among us, and each one takes away one aspect of uh, God's being, or God's creativity. Um, and so, like the loneliness we feel could be the same loneliness as like a white rhino facing extinction feels. And in the same breath, again, yeah, the joy we feel could be the joy we feel when we hear a northern cardinal singing at dawn in the morning. And this time of year for me in the Wisconsin landscape, the little frogs, the spring peepers and wood frogs, they start to sing, and it's just the most amazing thing. You all might know they make it through winter by letting their bodies freeze. They make a little glucose, which prevents total cell damage, but their hearts stop beating,
Mm.
their brain activity ceases. Um, and then all of a sudden, this time of year, the thaw starts to get those systems of life going again, and they wake back up to life, and they're like singing their little frog voices away, like at to to be back in this animated state again. It's just incredible, and we can feel when we hear that. I think we can feel that joy of the rebirth of the seasons too. So, um, yeah, just radical earth empathy as an invitation for that sort of uh, relation to the world these days.
Yeah, I know we did last year. I shared with you, we had done last year about, kind of this climate grief conversation that has since changed so much of my own ministry in this, and even the way I approach being in conversation with great thought leaders like yourself. And I want to quickly just reflect, like for you, just saying that it's like we are impacted by that by the loneliness and the sense of an animal's own sense or a species' own sense of demise. And, my immediate thought was like, I got to write that down. We're going to put that on a Nurture the Soul card that I've been creating. But really, I thought about what does that even mean for us when we think about what our own demise is, and I actually want to stop thinking like that and want to and stop centering the human in saying, oh, what could we learn from that as humans, and just be in it, and in that moment of understanding the loss and the fear and the loneliness that exists in so many of our species in the world beyond our human siblings, and let that be enough to move us, right? That kind of, for lack of better term, I don't want to say it's not a, well, I'll just say one of the things that had really changed my way of thinking of understand how species beyond humans move and communicate and do all of that stuff was a wonderful week-long stay inside my tent to the park ranger station at the Shenandoah National Park because we had literally torrential downpour for an entire week, and my ex-wife and I decided that we're not leaving. We are here. This is our vacation, and whatever will be will be. We learned so much about the trees. We learned so much about how trees model communication patterns for other species. We understood that how certain trees could sense danger coming and would work with the elements around it to drop the seeds in order for the next generation of trees coming. And of course, I'm a huge tree nerd now. I love all of it. And as soon as I saw in your book that you talk about oak ethics, I spent the most time reading and rereading the chapter on oak ethics. And so I'm curious at what you can share with us, and for those who haven't read your book yet, what is it about the trees? What is it about the oaks? And in particular, the ethics around it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, so that essay about the oak ethics, it's about Abraham and Sarah, um, Genesis chapter 18, and it's this quite uh, beloved, um, kind of deep taproot foundational story in the Judeo-Christian traditions. And it's also a story that's retold in the Quran, actually three different times in that text, which is the story of Abraham and Sarah camping underneath the oak trees of Mamre. It was their favorite campsite that they returned to a few times during their wanderings. And yeah, it's that moment, a hot day, and they're in the shade of the trees, and three strangers pass by, and Abraham runs out to them, welcomes them under the tree, under the shade, and Sarah whips up the most lavish uh, feast for them, and um, it's the foundational story of hospitality, and hospitality itself is like such a deep core spiritual practice, virtue that, shows up throughout Scripture. Jesus basically quotes from this when he's talking about what you do to the least of these, you do to me. I was hungry, I was thirsty. The letter to the Hebrews basically quotes this story, saying, "Do not neglect to entertain strangers, because by doing so, you're entertaining angels unawares," which is what happens in Genesis 18. Abraham and Sarah come to understand that these strangers have, in effect, acted more like angels, messengers of God, and bless them with this astounding gift of this news that they're gonna have a child. And yeah, so it's the foundational story of hospitality. And in that book, I asked this question, where did Abraham and Sarah learn such generous welcome towards the other? And a very traditional theological answer has been to locate this within what's called the ancient law of the desert, which is, um, you know, I'm thirsty and hot today, so I might need a drink of water, but you might be thirsty and hot tomorrow, and so it's almost this transactional thing. Like I'll show you some hospitality, and then I'll expect you to show that to me, which I'm sure there's something to that, but in my reading of it, what makes this like the story of hospitality is that they are so incredibly kind of like overabundant in their generosity. Like it's not just like a glass of water and like a little piece of bread. It's like it's lavish. And so where did they learn that type of hospitality was my question. And I just, the more I thought of them there under those oak trees, and the more I learned about trees myself, as you mentioned, such exciting teachings these days coming out on tree wisdom. Um, I came to realize that, trees themselves, of course, are masters of hospitality, creating the conditions for so many other life forms. And within the tree world, there's actually no other species of tree on our North American landscape, at least, that is more of a master in hospitality than the oak tree is. They host by far more biodiversity than many other species. So yeah, that's just what if, living at the foot of these trees, watching how the squirrels interacted with the trees and the birds and watching the abundance of the acorn mast, like the giving away of life. What if they learned that from the oak trees and then it, let that learning of hospitality extend through them towards the stranger, towards the other. And so that's what I mean by oak ethics in that essay. Um, so both trying to point out the wisdom of becoming kind of students and um, treating the land and the landforms as teacher, mentor. Um, but then also, yeah, just kind of inviting us to think about hospitality, not just as this act that humans can or cannot extend to one another, but hospitality as like the way ecosystems work, like the way gifts um, flow in the natural world. And so by being by showing hospitality ourselves, we are kind of coming into our participation as creatures here on this planet, among other creatures.
Yeah, the ways in which we show up, the ways in which we communicate with ourselves, with our beloved siblings, and partake, right, in this idea of hospitality is how communities of care are really cultivated, and I love all of that. There are some amazingly really difficult questions into the Q&A, but I will invite the rest of you all to go ahead and jump in if you have a question, to put it into our Q&A feature, which is the dialogue bubble with a question mark. But before we get to those, Rev, I know that you and I have gotten a chance to speak previously, and we talked about the biomimicry. And for me, I live so close to a factory that produces weapons of mass destruction that are being used in the Middle East now. I become acutely aware of how the how this group uses the natural environment, not only to design the weapons that they're using, but the natural environment to use the weapons. And so for me, when you and I have spoken about biomimicry in the past, you give me hope that it could be something totally different. It could look like us creating life, a newness. And so this was something alluded to in chat a little bit earlier. I'm curious, what could each of our faith communities learn from the ecosystems that we find ourselves amongst?
Mm. So basically, when I was describing the Abraham and Sarah relationship with oak trees, that's what I am starting to mean by this, like a spiritual version of biomimicry, like asking yourself, how does life live, and what can I learn and apply to my own engagements in the world? And this is such a exciting thing for me to think about these days. So, one of the founding thinkers of the biomimetic way is Janine Benyus, and I love her very short quote reminder invitation, which is just that she points out we are surrounded by genius. So if your kind of question is how to design the fastest warplane, then yeah, you might look to a Peregrine Falcon or something like that. So biomimicry in and of itself, is like most kind of technological uh, perspectives, is more morally neutral. So yes, as you point out, it can be used along those lines. But I'm finding such excitement and promise in my own work as pastor and minister these days, trying to invite myself to think more and more biomimetically when it comes to how our spiritual communities organize themselves and how they gather and how they worship. Um, so I just think, you know, you can just start to ask yourself, how does life live here where we live? Because life has these myriad genius ways of kind of solving the basic challenges and problems of living, of continuing to live. Um, so if you live among lots of prairies, you could start to deepen in your study and wisdom learning from prairie ecosystems, any ecosystem that you find yourself in. Um, you could even any one of us could just look up or out rather and like be start a biomimetic relationship with the clouds and the air and what can we learn about how clouds gather and disperse and how they move across the landscape and how they predict certain weather patterns and how they bless the landscape with their offerings. So yeah, just an invitation to try to bring some maybe biomimetic imagination into our work these days. So like if you're in a church and you're part of the music group, you can start to think, yeah, what can we learn from the bird song in our area? How can we be inspired by those spring peeper frogs? Or if you're engaged in activism, trying to bring about the radical change that we all yearn for. Like, there's much to learn about how radical change happens on the landscape. Like, I'm thinking particularly of what we can learn when we study forest succession. Like, what happens after a plot of land or a forest has been damaged, or the trees have been cut and the ground cleared. Like, if you can kind of step back and watch what that land will do over the generations to come, there's a whole liturgy of renewal that the land will start engaging in, and like you go for those first pioneer species that come in and they start to uh, regenerate the soil and make it more stable and nutrient dense, and then you have the fast growing uh, sun-loving trees that come in and further, establish a sense of life with the land and invite other forms of life in. And then eventually you have the mature, tall, slow growing, older growth forest that starts to set root. And each step is this kind of amplification of life, of biodiversity. And um, so yeah, if your work is creating the conditions for radical change, like there's actually quite a good bit to learn from how that happens on the landscape. Or if you're engaged any issue, like if you're deeply engaged in immigration justice, like there's maybe some things we can learn about how migration happens in the natural world, like bird migration or butterfly migration. Like in the natural world, migration is not a problem that needs to be solved. Like we're not over here saying like, gosh, I wish this year we could help those monarchs not have to leave Mexico. And go find their milkweed elsewhere, like or the Canada geese. Like migration is how life actually solves its problems and actually kind of uh and seeks its flourishing. So anyway, just I find a lot in this concept these days to
Now you're preaching.
ponder.
You're preaching, Rev. I love that. We're going to get to one of these easy questions here, but thank you. Thank you for dropping this beautiful knowledge and wisdom. We'll engage in this question. We'll have one more and then we'll let you go. But how do you think you will overcome our reluctance and embrace the earth to realize our true purpose of human beings within the whole of the universe? And then here's the really easy part of that question. What do you think our true purpose is? I love the question. Z.
Well, the direction I start to think with that question, and that's a big one, that's a great one, um, is just, you know, I do spend a lot of time thinking about, the climate crisis and ecological disruption, and like it can become so tempting to become quite down on humanity, like thoughts that like, life on Earth can go along just fine without us, and in fact, in many ways, biodiversity might go better if we weren't here. But then I take a deep breath and I just remember the most basic fact, which is that we are here, which
Mm,
is that Earth is making us and sustaining us. Life itself is making us and experiencing itself as us. which does suggest to me in sort of a deep, mysterious way that, Earth wants us here, life wants us here, creation wants us here, God wants us here, that there are some gifts and capacities that are in some ways uniquely ours to bring forth and to offer back to the rest of the world. And I don't necessarily have like the prescription, like here's our top five gifts as a species, but I think that's kind of what I want to, what I want for myself and our communities, and is to invite us to begin that work of sort of remembering and rediscovering and reimagining, how can we be gifts to the earth, to the landscape? Like how can we not just strive towards sustainability, but how can we live in such a way that is like that contributes to the hospitality that is the way that ecosystems work. Like, so I don't have the answer, but I feel a glimmer of hope when I start to think and remember and imagine that there are gifts that we can bring and give back to life. And I think spiritual community is the exact avenue to explore those gifts and encourage them in one another and exercise them in community.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And this idea of, once there's not yet a person that I've met who has gone out to nature and said that, oh, now I know all of the answers. They have come back and said, oh, I'm even more curious, right? And if only when you talk about biomimicry, if only our faith communities could cultivate that level of curiosity, kind of what you just alluded to. Which brings me to like sort of my final question for you. You have a newer faith community in Wisconsin. Been dreaming of it for a while. It's actually been around for a little bit longer than being newer. I know you're a CASA grant recipient, which is one of the granting opportunities through the national ministry setting of the United Church of Christ. So, what I'm curious about, if you could talk a little bit about your church, and we're in the season of Lent, which is ridiculous to me. I don't even know how we got here. I'm still in December 2025, but here we are, coming close to the end of Lent. How is it that you and your faith community are celebrating Lent this season, especially because the concept of your church is very much about what your books are about?
Mm, mm. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, for the last, I guess about 3.5 years now, my spouse Julie and I have been holding space for convening an outdoor spiritual community that we call Flicker Wild Church, and I think there will be maybe a link to that in the chat.
Yeah.
And we describe ourselves as having mycelial roots in the with the Wild Church Network, which is um, a great group like holding space and offering some teachings about new learnings on outdoor spiritual community. And then also we're in the new church discernment process with the Wisconsin Conference United Church of Christ, and so grateful to be part of the CASA, wonderfully generous CASA program, and um, very excited with what we've been up to. So yeah, just very briefly, we meet outdoors. We meet in circle around fire, and we frame it as the invitation not to worship in nature, like taking your normal Sunday bulletin into the woods for a Sunday, but like not worshiping in nature, but trying to worship with the more than human world, trying to uh, enter into the liturgy of the land in season that's always and already ongoing in those places. And so our call to worship is usually listening to the birds and speaking aloud some of the names of the birds we've been hearing and noticing. And um, anyway, so Lent, and again, we're trying to remix like the calendar of nature with the lectionary calendar, so we hold the two together. So for us, we meet in circle around fire, primarily 8 times a year right now, the equinoxes and solstices and the cross quarter days, midway points. So I think for Lent for us this year, that was what in the Celtic tradition is known as Imbolc, February 1. midway point between winter solstice and spring equinox. And then more recently, we had a spring equinox gathering. And to your question, I would just invite folks to remember that I would say Lent itself is such a kind of earthy season. So that word Lent comes from lengthen. It's about the lengthening of the light this time of year. It begins, of course, with Ash Wednesday. You are Earth and you return to Earth. And then the kind of one of the main scriptures that sets the framework for Lent is Jesus in the wilderness, the 40 days. And wilderness is another term that's like what we were talking about with desert or mountain. Like I think we're too quick to say wilderness mean as metaphor for like a difficult chapter in life or something. Whereas in the Hebrew word, it's midbar, and um, Wild Church theologian Victoria Lurs points this out well in her book. Midbar in Hebrew has an etymology meaning the organ that speaks. So wilderness is like the mouthpiece of creation. Like, and pretty much every major figure in Scripture is called at one point or another into wilderness, into relationship with the more than human world. Not just as like a difficult thing, although there is difficulty because the living of life involves its own challenges and um, but anyway, I love the little note in Mark's gospel about how the wild animals were with Jesus and the angels were ministering to him during those 40 days. And the Greek is so kind of vague there with the prepositions that you could also translate that as the wild animals were there like angels ministering to him.
Mm.
Um, so anyway, Lent as an earthy season. Um, yeah, we try to do things that help us have direct embodied experiences with the particular invitations of that season. So we did a kind of half of a communion ritual on spring equinox, which was that us and some neighbors in the city of Madison decided to try tapping our maple trees this year. And you might know you could just drink the sap straight. So we had a cooler filled with maple sap straight from the trees. And poured out generous cups to the group and did like that half of the communion elements as like a welcome spring like ritual. Like may the sap that flows, the life force that flows through the trees, may it flow through you um, and and be a part of the energy of this season. So I, yep. If there are questions about the Wild Church, happy to engage more with that, or folks can always reach out to me.
Wonderful. Yeah, we are definitely, if you have a question that maybe did not come up until you rewatched it or you shared it and you were in conversation with someone, you will receive a link to this. And we do hope that you share this webinar and that you do have questions. In your follow-up email will be a way to get in touch with Reverend Daniel. And for those of you who have tuned in live today, for those of you who are sharing this with others and going to watch with your community, to all of the dreamers and the lovers, I am so grateful to be in this virtual space with you. To our tech team that makes this pre and during and post webinar possible, thank you to our tech team and our marketing and communications team for making that possible. Reverend Daniel, thank you so much. You have been such a gift. I cannot wait to finish reading your second book, which we did not get a chance to talk about. So we're going to have you back. Um, live each session, excuse me, live each season as it passes, re-earthing spiritual practice. So we'll be reaching out to you again to have a second conversation if you're willing about that book. Links to the book are going to be included not only in chat, but also in a follow-up email. And beloveds, we're back. Although we're back after Lent. We are back on Monday. April 20th is our next webinar. It is part of our Future of Faith special offering. And during this webinar, we're going to be joined by the Reverend George Graham and our own Reverend Bentley de Bartolabate. Oh, I'm going to say it slower. Reverend Bentley DeBard E. Laban Phillips. We're going to be in conversation with both of them on how to be faithful and have it be our embodied practice. By being faithful as an embodied practice actually prepares us to respond not with fear or old ways of being, but to anchor ourselves to our communities, to our environment around us, and commit to cultivating trusting and compassionate practices. And so I can't wait to be in conversation with both of them. It'll give me some time to work on Bentley's name. Daniel, thank you again. And I hope that you are willing and able to take us out with a benediction.
Yes, thank you so much, Ellie, and many thanks to you all for being here and being a part of this. Um, for benediction, I want to offer just a little glimpse into the new book that's likely going to start shipping here in April, and that's in the introduction to the book, what I'm calling the Credo. I kind of surprised myself by finding myself writing a credo, like an I believe statement, and it's offered a little bit playfully because I know in the UCC we're not a creedal tradition, but I wanted to sort of reimagine a creed from a more ecological perspective. So just offer these words. Let's call it a wild church creed. I believe in the land and in the sky and in the call of wild geese. I believe that matter matters, that what is not opposed to God, but of God. I believe that Jesus meant it, saying, consider the birds of the air, consider the lilies of the field. Consider, from the Latin considerare, to think with the stars. I believe that the kingdom of God is among us and within us. I believe that life is not just life and death, but that life is life and death and new life. I believe that everything is everything else, that all flourishing is mutual, and that sacred presence flickers in the momentary encounters of life with life. I believe the human and more than human are co-evolved to participate in the creative impulses of Earth's astonishingly generative cosmic perch. I believe that prayer has roots, that sacred stories have fur and feathers, that landscape is liturgy, that soundscape is praise, that religion is an ecosystem. I believe in the communion of the clouds, the forgiveness of the fungi, the resurrection of the leaves, and the earth everlasting. Amen.
Amen. Mwah. Thank you. Thank you to you and your family and your community. Be well, beloveds. Happy Easter.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.